Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Taos, Baltimore, and Baltimore positive, although it's been a negative result in regard to football this week. I'm taking a little rest, but I'll get some Broncos in here. I'll get some Ravens relief in here. We're certainly going to get a little World Series going this week. Had a beautiful Friday at Mama's on the Half Shell doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour, presented by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I gave some Ravens scratch-offs away. Nobody came up and felt lucky to me. I gave a lot of tickets away, so somebody won some dough out in Owings Mills last week. Had a great conversation with Finn McCusker, who is Scunny McCusker's son, who I loved immensely. We talked salsa, we talked seafood, we ate oysters. It was a great time. And Howard Scher also came out and we pimped the skipjacks and talked about the late, great Jeff Amder and hockey season as well. But I have taken the foot off the gas a little bit with the Orioles and the Ravens the last month or two on the election season. I did not want to go into Trump or Trumplandia. I've done that before 8 years ago, 4 years ago. I can't believe it's come to this, but the week out, I'm getting a little nervous again. My F Trump cheap trick shirts might come out before the end of the week. And I just want to talk about all sorts of things because I invited Larry Hogan. No speaky, no comprende, never got back to me, like literally never happened. And Larry's been on the show many times. I voted for Larry. I'll say that out. I'm the Democrat that voted for Larry. And also invited Angela Alsterbrooks, who canceled on me twice, made appointments. So I've never met Angela Alsterbrooks. So when it comes to these races, I am like every other citizen out there saying, okay, where am I going? And Pam Wood is here, and she is from the Baltimore Banner, longtime Baltimore Sun, now at the Baltimore Banner. Go hit the paywall, pay them, support local journalism. For God's sake, please support local journalism. I've read the Sun lately. I've seen the deeds there in Question H and all of that. But Pam, you're when I usually say hello to you, and we talk crab cakes. Usually, sometimes at Costas, before the bridge went down, it was easier for you to get from Anne Arundel County over the bridge to Dundalk. We're going to get the bridge rebuilt and all that. You're like a little nervous, right? Like this is a week out. The first thing you said to me is X amount of days. We're days away. And I had Josh Kurtz on earlier, and I worked at the Sun from 1986 to 92. And I said this to Josh, and you'll laugh, you'll get a big chuckle out of this, but back in the day, as a kid, I was 17 years old. Every election, every 2 years there's election, primary, all the bosses were in. The boardroom was filled with pizza and food and salads, up all night. All election nights in the news world. This is the world you came from. This is an exciting week, but also there's a lot going on. Money being spent, stuff that didn't exist 30, 40 years ago in regard to modern media and how it shapes an election.
Yeah, it's a busy time as we're recording. We're 8 days left until Election Day. Not that I'm counting, not that there's not a countdown app on my phone until it's all over, but it's been a busy year. Look, presidential election years are often kind of a snoozer in Maryland, right? Maryland always votes for the Democrat at the top of the ticket. Kamala Harris is going to win in a landslide in Maryland. We don't know what's going to happen nationally. No surprises there, but we've got this U.S. Senate race that is taking all of my attention. It is competitive. It's got national interest, and we are seeing spending and ads out the wazoo that we're just not used to in Maryland. So it's been quite a season.
What do you make of it in regard to Angela Alsterbrooks is a lousy human. She cheats on taxes. Larry Hogan is a lousy human. He got deals with his family. They're both elected if they've both been voted on and voted against many times. In my world where I am, everyone knows who Larry Hogan is. Now, whether they're going to go in and vote that way, whether they're going to change their views on things. But Larry's run an interesting campaign that I never thought he was going to get into. I took him at face value a couple years ago and he said, I really don't want to be a senator. That turned out to not really be true.
Right. Yeah. He said that many times. He said that to me. He said that to lots of people, that his heart was not in legislating. And you kind of saw that when he was governor, where he shined and where he felt most comfortable was executive actions. That's why like it or not, COVID was very good for Governor Hogan because he just got to make important decisions and not have to deal with making laws. But now he wants to be one of 100. And he does have that name ID, right? Everybody knows who he is. It's got to be above 95%. You'd have to be under a rock if you don't know who Larry Hogan is. If you're in Maryland, and Angela Alsobrooks, yeah, she's Prince George's County executive. There's almost 1 million people live there, but there's 6 million people in the whole state who maybe don't know her as well. So she has been getting her name out, and she's been trying to convince people that maybe you liked Larry Hogan as governor, but he's not right for Senate, that there needs to be a Democratic majority in the Senate to protect reproductive rights and all that sort of thing. And that's really how they've been framing this debate and this election. And it's been exactly that same message from both camps week after week. Hogan, is countering and saying, "Oh, I'm independent and I'm trustworthy and I won't go with the, Republican bosses all the time. I'll be my own man in Washington." And it's just day after day, I hear it over and over again from both of them as I follow them around.
But do you believe it? What side do you believe? And I guess in regard to Governor Hogan and the campaign and the national money that's come in on the other side of it, I saw the last election when his selected, I should not elected, she was not elected, selected, and Kelly Schultz really had a hard time against Cox and Trumpism and running upstream in his own party against Trumpism in a place where Trumpism's still very vibrant in Trumplandia and in that party in this state. I'm wondering how many Republicans who are only turning out, I don't know, to put a perfunctory vote in for Trump as a middle finger, because to your point, he can't win here, but what that means for Larry Hogan. Not that they would ever vote for Alsobrooks, that they would abstain, that how many people would just not support him in some way, or whether you're going to look down ticket and say the whole way he's going to get every Republican vote, because I'm not even sure of that. I think these ads make him unpopular with Trump people.
Yeah, so Governor Hogan has to do this balancing act in order to win. And he says this himself. He said it to me and others. Look, he has to win just almost every Republican. He's got to keep them on board, including those MAGA Trump folks. He's got to keep them in the fold. He's got to get, a majority, more than half of the independent voters. And then he's got to get somewhere around like 30% of Democrats. So
that's
Donald
heavy
Trump,
lifting, dude.
It is. And
that's heavy lifting, Larry.
And he's done it twice, right, for governor. So he's trying to do it a third time. The problem is like he's on the ballot at the same time as Donald Trump. They both have an R next to their name. And Democrats, and the case that Angela Alsobrooks is making, is they need to be, discerning about that, that those crossover persuadable Democrats, are they persuadable this year? That's where it will be won and lost, potentially. And Hogan is holding most in polling. He is holding most of the Republican voters. And look, in my neighborhood, I live in a very purple area. I see houses that have a Trump Vance sign and a Larry Hogan sign. So he is so far managing to hold them, even though he is running away from Donald Trump to try and please those Democrats.
It's tricky. That's fascinating, right? I mean, that makes this more than complex. And it also has made it very interesting for outside interests to come in here and dump a bunch of money that has made my conduits to the Alsobrooks campaign have just, she's just running around collecting donor money, and that's what she needs to do. And that's what they feel like they're fighting money with money. And that is the race. That if I wanted to meet Miss Alsobrooks, I'd have to pay $500 for, to come into the cocktail party or whatever. I'm offended by all of it, just as a citizen, as a journalist, as just, thinking that is it all on the up and up, or how much of it could possibly be on the up and up. This thing has taken, to your point, a lot of your attention. What have you been writing about and looking to write about? Because to your point, the attack ads themselves are all based in some level of scandal that they want reported, or reported more than the 3 words I just gave it earlier, that they want everybody, they want you looking under the hood of the other person's car in some way.
Yeah, and before I go into that, just the reason why we're getting all this money and all this attention is because the Senate right now is 51 Democrats, 49 Republicans. It's just on a razor thin margin. Democrats are trying to hold as many seats as possible. Republicans are trying to flip as many seats as possible. And this one is, look, all the sort of prognosticators out there that rate the competitiveness say this still is likely or leans Democratic to win, but it is still somewhat competitive. It's in play. Governor Hogan, very uniquely successful Republican here. So literally tens of millions of dollars are pouring in from the national Republicans, the national Democrats. The ads that are hitting Angela Alsobrooks are coming from a group called Maryland's Future. That is funded tens of millions of dollars from these like big name Republican mega donor business people who, have the kinds of jobs I don't even understand what they do. They're pouring this money in because they want to get a Republican majority. Now, the question is the attack ads, do they maybe cancel each other out? There's an element of truth on both sides. But do voters care? Do voters get turned off? Or does it cancel out? Like Angela Alsobrooks had a property tax issue. Larry Hogan, has a big real estate business that's continued to make money for him. And, did he advantage his own business somehow? There's no proof of it, but there's questions. And does it all become a wash? And do people care more about what they'll do on the economy, what they'll do on the war in Gaza, what they'll do about reproductive rights? That's the question. And I'm looking forward to talking to voters on election day to see, what made their decision, and was it those ads?
Pam Wood is out on the election trail for all things the Baltimore Banner. She is down in the State House. And let's get off the election, but we'll come back to it. Just where Wes Moore is in all this is somehow, some way, the orange guy's running the country next Wednesday, or leading an insurrection after he loses, or claiming that the election's rigged, or any of the other things that we can only know he will do, given all this. But where Wes is on all of this with the bridge and running Maryland, and if Kamala Harris is not the president of the United States and we have Donald Trump, the Democrats are going to be looking to do something next time around. I shudder to think there will be a next time around. But I would think that this is an interesting way all the way around. That we have a candidate who is upwardly mobile in the Democratic Party either way and trying to govern Maryland, but also outside the state, really campaigning hard for Kamala, right?
Yes, that's right. I was actually with Governor Moore this morning. He voted down in Annapolis at early voting. Yeah, and he is all in for Alsobrooks and has been campaigning for her, but also for Kamala Harris. And before Kamala Harris was the nominee, he was all in for Biden. He is doing his duty as a Democratic governor to push the top of the ticket. He's been in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin recently, Georgia, North Carolina. We think in this last week he's going to go somewhere else. We're not sure yet. Really stumping for Vice President Harris. And look, I talked to him about what would happen if Donald Trump is elected because, Governor Moore and other leaders in Maryland have very specific concerns, including funding for the Key Bridge, keeping the FBI headquarters that's been decided it will go in Greenbelt, and keeping that decision. Donald Trump put that on ice before. I asked Governor Moore specifically, well, what worries you about a Trump presidency? And he said, Pam, I mean, everything. So, he's fully on board and, traipsing around the country trying to get Vice President Harris elected over Trump. And
it's not like Trump
eye
last
to the future
time
potentially.
Denied all sorts of things to every state that didn't vote for him, right? Like literally.
Yes. And look, Maryland has so many infrastructure projects that they need funded. The Key Bridge rebuild, the Red Line in Baltimore, that'd be an east-west light rail line that Governor Moore is trying to restart. We have two rail tunnel projects in Baltimore that need federal funding that are important to the economy and travel. FBI. Federal workers generally, we have a lot of federal workers and contractors. And if Donald Trump and Project 2025 follow through on their promises to, gut the workforce, like what happens to all those people who that's their job in Maryland? So a lot they're concerned about.
A lot they should be concerned about. This is where I do my public service and say, I own an FCC license. I serve the public here. Every elected official, there's a reason politicians have been on my airways because they're always welcome. And I like to have them on. I like to hear views. I like alternative views. I'm good with any views. So I would just say vote. Please vote. As a citizen, it's important to me. It's important to my family. Coming from Venezuela, my mother was born at a time where she couldn't vote, literally 1919, the whole suffrage thing. Like all of you know all of it's not rhetoric. I just would hope people are paying attention this week. If you're voting ahead of time, great. I'm a day of voter. Tell me how the state, how we're counting votes when Mueller and I would get after it, and how they're counted, and during COVID. And I have mailed in, I've gotten ballots, I've done all that. I've just sort of gone back since my mother died. I just sort of like want to get, on that Tuesday, go do my thing. Nobody was there when I voted primary, like nobody at all. It feels like everybody's doing it a different way or voting early. But clogging up the pipes in regard to Trump and giving any glimmer that we go to bed Tuesday night and it's not solved in whatever way it would be solved, or hopefully not solved in the wrong direction. Part of this is counting votes, right? I mean, and just
Mhm.
and that's all. That's going to be his issue when he loses on Wednesday morning, no matter what, right? Counting votes and how we count them in our state.
Yeah, and it's changed a lot over the last couple of years with COVID and everything else. So it's understandable that like a lot of folks maybe lost track of like why we don't always know what's going to happen on Tuesday night. So there's three ways to vote in Maryland. You can vote by mail ballot, and I have mine here.
Don't show me who you voted for. You're a journalist.
I haven't done it yet. I haven't done it yet. You can vote by mail, and you can return those at the drop boxes, which is what I prefer to do. I like seeing it like go in the box. Don't have to worry about the mail.
I
You
took
can
pictures of that. I mailed it at Camden
yeah.
Yards when I lived downtown. There was a little ballot box right in the front door, and I mean, it's
What a
America.
cool spot.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a great spot. It was a good picture.
Yeah, you can also in-person early vote, and that goes through Halloween as the last day of it this year. And what's cool is you can go anywhere in your county or in Baltimore City where you live. You can go anywhere and they'll have the ballot for you, or you can do day of. So what happens with these mail ballots that they get early, the people who've mailed them back already, not like me waiting until the end, they can start at your local elections office. They'll start opening them up and like tabulating them secretly. They don't give us any results, but they'll start putting those in the system ahead of time. And then, the early vote, same thing. Once early voting is done, then they can run those numbers. So right after the polls close at 8 o'clock on election day, in that first hour, we should get all of the early voting results and a bunch of the mail ballots that were already returned. It won't be all of them. The rest of those mail ballots get counted after election day, but we'll get a chunk of early vote. I mean, we'll get all of the early vote. We'll get a chunk of the vote by mail. Then as the night goes on election night, we'll get the day of voting. And then there still will be a portion of, mail ballots called absentees that they'll count afterwards. But we may get enough to know, what the results are going to be for, say, the Senate race. We'll definitely know in Maryland what happens in the presidential, but every state is a little different when they count those mail ballots or absentee ballots, and it can be a process to get every single vote counted, can take several days or a week or so. So we may not know nationally what happens depending on how all those swing states, tally their votes. So we have to be patient.
Well, yeah, and listen, I'll be glad when I stop getting texts from all of them. Like my phone.
Me too.
My gosh almighty. Pam Wood is here. She's the Baltimore Banner. Next time we get together, hopefully it's over crab cake somewhere good. Like Faithley's, I got my Faithley shirt on here. From your perspective, and you're so into this as a journalist and being, at the Banner, and everybody in your little space is into the election. You have your own responsibilities in Maryland, but the larger picture of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump and where all of that falls, I can't believe it's come to this. I want to give you the floor to just say whatever you have to say about it. But watching Pennsylvania, watching Ohio, watching what's going on 30 miles north of here, like literally. And if you've traveled at any point to a state like Ohio, and I have, to watch television, just seeing what's taking place in Wisconsin and Georgia, in these places where there are, to your point, vulnerabilities far beyond what the perception would be of Larry Hogan winning next week. But more than that, on the presidential side, it's just so important. And when they start talking about Puerto Ricans being trashed to start a rally at the Garden the other night, I'm just losing my mind.
Yeah, I have to wonder. I'm very interested in that, how far that permeated all of those, racist things, frankly, that were said at that rally. It happened on a Sunday. People are watching football. How much are they reading the news? How much do people know? I mean, certainly Vice President Harris's campaign jumped right on it. A number of Puerto Rican stars jumped on it. I am sort of intrigued, and I would love to read a good story about this, about people who really believe that, people who are undecided. Everybody I know is in one camp or another, family, friends, everything, voting for Harris or Trump. And, why are people undecided on what matters? Are they undecided at this last minute? So I'm just, watching and reading the stories in those other states. And yeah, right north of us, there's a number of people from both parties in Maryland who go up to Pennsylvania and are knocking on doors. I've seen people in my social media feeds in Harrisburg and Lancaster knocking doors to persuade those voters, because it's not competitive here. So, we'll see what turns out. We'll see what our neighbors in Pennsylvania do. It's really fascinating.
It feels like a quiet before whatever is going to happen. And I mean, we only had an insurrection the last time around, and this guy's only been indicted on and charged and found guilty on all sorts of things, and he could be running the country next Wednesday. That's we failed, Pam. We failed. We failed. Nonetheless, Pam Wood is here. That's my little political thing. But turnout
Mhm.
in Maryland. I was so disappointed by the primary, just in a general sense, for the city turnout, especially, and in regard to, well, I know people like this for sure. Not so into politics. Kamala's going to win here anyway. I like Kamala. Also Brooks is going to win. She's up 14 points. Ask anybody. That it just feels like, yeah, throw my time away, my vote away, whatever it is. That not undecided, but on the fence of whether they're going to vote or not at all, and how much trouble it's going to be, and whether they wake up on the right side of the bed next Tuesday and get it in or not. I know people like that, but I also know people just say, yeah, this time around, the vote's already decided. I'm not going to do it. And that's the worst part for me. But I think that that's also the part that's very obvious when you look at primaries and when you look at turnout, that turnout in population, it's a wild number in our culture. Probably something that our forefathers, and I'm sure you've studied it more than me, just would never understand when they got together 250 years ago to put this thing together. That so many people, not just disaffected, uninterested, just not even interested in voting.
Yeah, I grew up in a family where it was instilled in me that you vote, you always vote, and you keep your vote secret. My parents were big on that, but they were always voters, and I never miss an election. But yeah, other people may feel like, oh, my vote doesn't matter. I mean, it does count, but they feel like it doesn't matter, in a lopsided state like Maryland. Anybody who has that this year, I would say, look, the Senate race is not a given. Yes, also Brooks is up in the polls, but your vote will matter there. Your vote matters in Baltimore City on these ballot questions happening. But it is disappointing, people who choose not to vote or feel disaffected. That said, I spoke this morning with Jared Demarinis, the state director of elections, and he was very excited about the turnout so far, between mail ballots that have been returned and the first few days of early voting. We're getting close to about 1 million people who voted already, and there's 4.1 million registered voters. So already getting close to 25% turnout, and we still have a whole bunch of early voting left to go, and we have Election Day, which still is the biggest day. So he's optimistic that people will be driven to turn out. Even if we know Harris is going to win in Maryland, some people still want to vote to say, I supported her or I supported him as a point of pride, even if they don't know. So, we'll see. We'll see if the Senate race drives turnout, or if people are early and then it peters out. I think it's important to vote, whatever your persuasion is. What they say, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu, right? You should have your, be part of making your choice of who our leaders are. I think it's important.
You know,
That's my civic
hey,
encouragement.
please do, please do. Pam Wood here from the Baltimore Banner. I highly recommend that you follow her work, and as we get up on the election next week. So you live in Anne Arundel County, you have your own interest down there, and your own races and things, and you're covering the State House in Annapolis. I am in Baltimore County and seeing Johnny O and Kim Classic, moving around here, and uncontested sort of races and in other places. And I know the sixth is messy with Trone's exit on the west side. The question H thing's gotten to me. I had Zeke Cohen on last week. I'm mixing up Zach Orr and Zeke Cohen. There's my sports reference for you. But I had Zeke on a couple weeks ago just talking about that. And then your former employers and what's gone on with Sinclair and the Sun, and not just reporters and how reporters are being handled and unions and guilds, but things that are getting politicized on ballots that are brought on by sort of a reigning Republican media class to get agendas met through questions. What are you here? What are the other things other than God, I hope Kamala wins, wherever we are in the Senate thing, and then individual congressional leads? What is contested in your mind? What would be shocking to you, and what's on the menu as far as things? First thing you're checking at 9 o'clock next Tuesday night.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be on the Senate race, but I would encourage people to take a look at your school board races. A number of jurisdictions have competitive elected school board races this year. That includes Anne Arundel, where I live, Howard County, Carroll County. School boards are the people who make a lot of important policy decisions for how your public schools run. We have seen school board meetings where they're talking about, banning books and, curriculum changes. They're the ones who pick who the superintendent is. It's very important. There's different forces at play. The Baltimore Banner has a voter's guide where you can look up like your jurisdiction, see who those candidates are. We also just published several stories about some of the races, who the candidates are. And now in school boards, it's officially nonpartisan. But let's be real, you can tell there's a partisan lean when you look at the candidates, who's endorsed them, what they're talking about. If they're talking about parents' rights, that's a Republican term. If they're talking about like equity, that's like a Democratic term. But you should really do your homework. Don't skip over the school board races because those are important seats. It's hard to find information about them, which is why we just published some stories in a voter's guide about your school board.
This is why I bring you on. Yeah, anybody could sit here and talk Kamala and Donald Trump, or even the Alston Brooks Skoga thing. Polls and pollsters, and this is where I always get sideways with Malia and Gonzalez, all of these people. I know they're funded. I have a hard time with the science part of believing a poll, and when you quote it, or media people that quote it, or it's quoted to me by Team Alston Brooks that they're 14 points up and all they need is more money and the donor class and pay $500 and come to the rubber chicken dinner or whatever it is, cocktail party. From my perspective on all of it, I sit back and watch it and say, what's going to matter here is that we have fair elections in this country, right? Like all of these things that we talk about that we have that my mother didn't have, that you don't have in China, you don't have in Russia. It's just such a big week. And you guys do a great job of like trying to take these other issues because they don't bubble up from the surface. Things like school boards, you have to seek that out. Really, you
Right.
do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll say one thing about polls, all the candidates say, and it's true, the poll that matters most is the poll when people go to vote, right? On election day, leading up to election day. So we've taken a tack this year with the Senate races. We have one story that we just keep updating with a summary of each poll, right? So you can go in one place and just see what all the polls are, and we say, who did the poll? Who paid for the poll? How did they do it? What was their methodology and what was the most important thing that this poll found? So you can just sort of get bite size because we don't want to blow up the polls because, it's just a slice in time that's not necessarily predictive of what's going to happen. It's if it were held today, what would happen? And a lot of things can happen between the time a poll was taken and the election. It does give an interesting barometer of maybe where the candidates stand and they can find some things. But we've tried to be responsible about it and not overemphasize the polls, but instead give people the tools to understand the basics about them if that's what they're interested in, and compare them one to the other. And I'm pretty proud of that. I think it was a smart choice for us not to go too all in on polls and instead focus more writing about the issues the candidates are talking about and their strategies.
I think the polling thing's awesome, and I like talking about it. I just don't like talking about it as science or as gospel, that this is exactly how people are feeling. Because to your point, we're all going to find out next Wednesday morning. All right, all this politics crap aside, let's get serious here. Orioles.
Yep.
Off season, because that's your thing. I mean, everybody knows that. How are you feeling? And this Dodger Yankee thing aside, just how are you feeling about new ownership? What kind of investment needs to be made? The most important opinion you have here isn't Trump or Kamala. It's whether we're going to sign Corbin Burns or not. So.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, after the Orioles lost in the playoffs, it was so deflating, right? I mean, we were all just deflated. I mean, wasn't the best end to the season, but I thought we would go further. And so I mostly
wasn't
just
any fun. They had no
yeah.
fun. The Indians, at least they had a walk. They had a little fun, right? There was no fun. We had no fun.
Yeah, so I've mostly tuned out on baseball, although, of course, I guess if I'm rooting for anybody, it would be the Dodgers over the Yankees, because, of course. But the new ownership, maybe it's just because I'm a journalist and I'm always skeptical of everything. I am hopeful they'll make the right investments, smarter than I would make, probably hopeful, but I don't know. It's a guarantee, right? It's sort of wait and see. Certainly, they do seem to be not just financially invested, but emotionally invested in really wanting to get the best outcome, and they really seem to want to please fans and they want to win. Will they make the best choices? I'm hopeful, but I don't put 100% faith in anything. Again, I guess it's my skepticism. So I'm hopeful we'll see what they do.
Because this is what I've done all of my life. The issues for me are financial and structural in regard to how those 10,000 empty seats in a playoff game get filled, and they get filled with real money. I have a dear friend of mine that's is in baseball, and I was considering going out to LA for games 6 and 7. And, face value on the tickets is $700, right? Like, let's start with that. Like, if we ever get there, how many of our own fans are not going to be able to participate at that level? And I think of the money part of it that needs to fund it. After Masson, what the league's trying to do to nationalize the TV revenue. I say you want to nationalize the revenue, nationalize the payroll, because then that's what makes the NFL in my mind. And that's what's sort of this differentiator with the Dodgers and the Yankees having all of this money. I wonder what the Orioles can be on their best day. In this market, given that the Nationals exist, because I've watched all of that happen. I had Peter sitting next to me 27 years ago. There's no way this will work. We have two teams. Neither team will be any good. They won't have money. And you don't have to have money to make the World Series, but it doesn't hurt. And they're going to need some level of money is all I'm saying. And I don't know where that's coming from in this marketplace. That worries me for baseball. It's very white, kind of like the Trump campaign. It's very white, very old, downtown. And the fact with my own eyes 3 weeks ago, I don't want to put you on the spot because you're busy. It's election season, but I don't know if you went to those games or not. I know a lot of people didn't. Not enough people did.
I did,
and it bothered me. I hope it bothers David Rubenstein and Katie Griggs.
I did not go. I went last year and I went before, years before, because there is nothing like playoff baseball, man. It is in the sports world, like, it is so great. And I think there were some challenges, like people were unsure how well we were going to do. The games were on weekdays. It was like cool. And I think it was a little bit rainy. And, I thought about it before. And then even the day of, you could get tickets for like $20. And I thought, I was very busy with work with the election and I felt like a bad fan, but I think a lot of people had that same thought, like, I don't know. But what's interesting to me is we're going to have these upgrades and renovations coming to the ballpark now that the lease was signed. They're going to issue the state bonds. And, I got the survey like everybody else did about, would you like this type of suite or that, all these different seating options. And they all looked very cool, these ideas they were floating to fans. But I thought, man, that's going to be really expensive. That's maybe once a year, once every other year. I just want a regular seat that's affordable. Can we keep the games affordable for families, for people? You can't drop hundreds of dollars on the regular,
Let
going to baseball
alone what
games.
they're going to charge for television, which I've talked a lot about.
Hmm.
Like that being if you're going to hit me for 400 or 500 bucks a year to have the games on TV, I won't have the games and they'll go away and you just lost the fan, you lost the customer. Like so, I am concerned about how they're going to distribute it because I don't think they have a plan,
Well,
and
yeah,
I
and
think that's the
yeah.
scariest part. They don't really know what they're doing, and they're going into an uncharted space where they're just promising all this money to these players, but I don't know that if the real bean counters, Mr. Rubenstein comes in and says, he bought the team for fun. Now he's got to pay for it. Now he's got to learn about the
Hmm.
union. He's got to learn about Scott Boras. Have the fans. When are we signing Gunner? When are we signing Gunner? Gunner's not signing, dude. He's Boras. He's not signing. He's not. They don't ask the owner to do something he can't do. So I think that this is where it all starts to say those are the Dodgers, those are the Yankees, and you can say, well, we can't afford that. We're small market and all that. Well, I don't think the fan base here is going to want to hear that after watching the losing that we've all witnessed and how much more fun it is to win, as you pointed out.
It is way more fun to win. And, one thing that's sort of a mystery to me, I don't understand all those legal details of Masson and all that litigation, but you have to have cable to get Masson, and I have cable. And that is one of the reasons why I have cable, so I can come home from work and flip on, watch the end of the game. But if you don't have cable, which is so many people, you're blacked out if you've got the MLB app and like a way for people to still watch the games in Baltimore without having cable. I think fans would like that. I don't know how that fits in the financial picture, the legal picture. Just as a fan, make it easier to watch the games on TV. I would think that's what a lot of people want. So
Well,
that'll
I
be
agree
my
with that.
my
And I don't
request.
just mean here. I have my dear friend John Keller from Arkansas, my Dundalk buddy, lives out in Arkansas. And I'm like, do you get the games every night? Because it feels like you're really into it. He's like, no, I just watch the highlights on the app. I said, so how much would you be
Mm.
willing to pay? He's like, well, I buy Peacock and I do this. And I'm like, well, I don't know, but I do know the models about to change, and they better figure that part out about recruiting new people who are playing lacrosse or people of color who are adults and don't know what baseball is, but have money and would like to be a part of the party if you could make them a part of the party. And I feel like that the Orioles have snoozed. I mean, yeah, look, it's no secret, you and me, we've been through this, Free the Birds, Angela, they've done a poor job. Those 10,000 empty seats would speak at $20 would speak to the fact that there's growth potential here. I'm just interested to see what it's going to be. And I'm really glad you brought the money up, Pam, because I bring it up all the time about what they're going to do with that money and where I've seen that money go in other places, including the football stadium, and saying, what does that mean to me? How's that
Mhm.
money? How are you getting more money out of me because you spent that money on that? Or how am I getting more enjoyment as a citizen when I do come? Those are things we're going to be monitoring. But I know the
Mhm.
one thing we don't have to monitor. You love baseball. I love baseball. You're following the election. I'm following you. Pam Wood is here. She's at the Baltimore Banner. You can subscribe. You can follow. Certainly, she talked about these school races and different races that we're not getting $1 billion spent about what a bad person Angela Alser Brooks is, what an awful person Larry Hogan is, and how everybody's terrible and all of that while we watch baseball games all night, which is what I'm doing all
Mhm.
week. I do hope people are following your work and taking the election seriously. You and I, we agree on nothing else. We're vote, vote, vote. Get everybody out to vote. That's probably the most important message we can make this week, as well as trying to educate folks where they can get it from you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, if I could just give one more plug, thebaltimorebanner.com, we have a voter's guide. It's right on our homepage. We ask, basic information about all the candidates. We sent them questionnaires. You can see in their own words what they say about the issues. It's a great way to just read up so you can be informed and make your choice ahead of voting.
Well, hey, I appreciate your time, your friendship. At some point, we're going to crab cake. I've come through the tunnel. You can get through the harbor tunnel, still get to Costas. But I'm at
Yep.
Fadley's. I'll bring the tour. I'll bring now that Ray's battling cancer down in Pasadena, my dear friend and executive producer. I'm finding myself a little bit more down in the Dina area, so I'll be try to pass through and I'll get a crab cake with you. Hey, stay sane this week. Get some rest. Root against the Yankees. Do everybody needs to do their two good red-blooded American things. Vote and root against the Yankees this week.
There you go.
Pam Wood joining us here from the Baltimore Banner, one of our defending champions. We're going to get the Maryland Crab Cake Tour back out on the road, courtesy of our friends at Jiffy Lube and the Maryland Lottery. Also, our friends at Curio Wellness and Far and Doddard putting me out for 26 crab cakes, or excuse me, oysters in 26 days in 26 ways. I'm mixing up my crab cakes and oysters at this point. It's all brought to you by Liberty Pure Solutions. 1-800-CLEAN-WATER. The oysters keep the bay clean. My friends at Liberty Pure keep me running clean with delicious water here so I can hydrate myself for election season and baseball. I'm Nestor. My thanks to Pam Wood from the Baltimore Banner. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore positive. Now go vote.